we're going to have a look today at how we can use some of these integers and floats possibly as well with some operators now to kind of create a little bit of a calculator that can do some calculations for us. So we're going to ask for a couple of numbers from the user, and we typically will start with the x variable name for kind of the first number, and I'm going to ask for an input from the user. I'm just going to say what is x, and it's going to ask, and we're going to get that. But remember, by default, that's going to give it to me as a integer, and I don't want that because I'm going to be doing some calculations with it. Sorry, that's by default going to give it to me as a string, and I don't want that because I'm going to do some calculations. So I need to convert it automatically into an integer. I'm going to do the same again for the y variable. So we get two numbers. Let me just add a comment in here. Get two numbers from the user. And then let's just say I wanted to do something nice and simple, like I wanted to add these two together. So I could create a variable called answer is x plus y, and then I'm going to print the answer. Let me add another comment in here, add the numbers and print. So let's just test this out. So what is x? 5. What is y? 7. And then the answer is 12. Good. So let's that's quite easy. That's quite a nice way of doing it. We could have had subtract in here. Let's just check that works. Let me try 10. What is y? 4. 6. Good. Let's try multiplying now. What is x? 4. Let's try 7. So 28. Yep, that works. And we could divide as well. So let's try this. What is x? 10 divided by 2. Interestingly, it's given this to me as a float automatically, which is fine, because let's just say I'd had something like 6 divided by 5, then it's going to need to be in a float. So that's quite good. That's really useful of Python for it to be able to do that. So that's a way that we can create like a simple calculator using Python and using these operators, adding, subtracting, multiplying and dividing, and also converting the data types. Going back to something that we did a little bit earlier with functions, I think we can make this a little bit clever. So I'm going to create a function. First I'm going to do an addition function. So I need to use my def keyword, and this I'm just going to call add to keep it nice and simple. And I'm going to put my parentheses and my colon. So what do I want it to do? Well, it's going to do a sum, yeah. So it needs to be something like let's put all of this inside of here. So it's going to do this. It's going to do this for us. So when I run this now, let's just check. Oh, I've just noticed an error that I left. I left that the division. So it's really important just to check through your code. I've written add, so I'm making sure that I am adding. So nothing is happening because remember I've not called my function at the moment. So if I call it by typing the name of the function followed by parentheses, it should run it. Good. 5, 2, 7. Good. So that works. So I could do this again for subtraction and multiplication and things like that. But I'm actually, if I did that, let me show you with the subtraction. Okay, so I've still got x and y. This time it's going to be subtract, and I'm going to print it, and I'm going to call the thing. But you'll notice that I'm using lots of this bit here, where we're getting the two numbers from the user. I'm reusing that code, and actually there's some cleverer things that we can do with this, just to make it more efficient and more user friendly. So I don't want to have this bit of code here in, because I'm repeating it lots of times. So I'm going to take this out, and then before we call the function, in fact, let me take all of this out underneath both of my definitions there. We're gonna have it so then we can add and we can subtract, but we're using these x and y variables appropriately. So when I run it, it should read through all this, but it should start with this line here. So what is x? 5. What is y? 7. And you'll see that it's printed out. So it's done the add for us. It's taken the x and y. These are global variables, and it has printed out the answer onto the screen. But let's just say I didn't want it to be printed out automatically. I didn't want to print out what those things were, and maybe I wanted to do something different. Maybe instead of x and y, this I wanted to be number 1, and this to be number 2, and then in here I wanted this to be number 3 and then number 4. Okay, so I wanted to do something slightly different there, and I didn't want it to print out the answer. I've also used answer twice here, so let me do this as sum, and this can be subtraction. Okay, I'm going to delete a little bit of this white space just to tidy it up a little bit, and then call the add and subtract functions. Okay, so now when I run it, hopefully it's still going to ask me for x and y, so it is 6 and 7, but then we've got this name error. We've got this number 1 is not defined, and we've got some problems here with the naming of my variables. So what we can do when we call the function, we can put in these x and y variables here. So let me type in x and y. I'm doing 2 variables, so I'm going to separate them with a comma. So what's that? So then we're going to feed this into the addition function. And what we need to do is, if I wrote in here number 1 and number 2, what Python will do, it will take whatever is the first bit, the first parameter here is going to be linked to this one, and then number 2 is going to be linked to the second one. So let's test that out and see what happens when I run this. Let's see if we get the same errors again. So 5 and 10. Okay, this time, oh, it's a subtraction. So again, let me do this for x and y, and then subtract. It's going to be number 3 and number 4. So when we run it now, so we've got 8 and 2, nothing's going to happen. That's good, okay, because I didn't want it to print out inside these functions when they get called. But you'll see that I've got these variables that are linking to here, and we've got the sum. So I could then print out the sum, but I don't want to do that. I want to print out in the main kind of function here what the sum, for example, would be, and again I'd want to print out here the subtraction as well. I want to print it out in my main function. I don't want to always have to have it printed every time I add or subtract. Sometimes I will, sometimes I might not want to. So let's test this out. So okay, right, I'm getting a name error now because subtraction is not defined. Remember, subtraction is just this local variable here inside this function. So I can't print from that because I've not returned any values. So to return this value from subtraction, I'm going to use the return keyword, and I've called it subtraction here. I'm going to just shorten this to sub t, just so you can just see the subtle differences between the naming of the variables. I'm just going to call this sum with two m's, and then if we print it out here, sum let's see what happens now. So x. Okay, so I'm still getting this name error. Sum is not defined. Did you mean sum? Now, what I need to do is I need to assign a variable to whatever is returned from calling this function. So if I wrote sum equals with the two m's, remember that this is the value that's going to get returned here, and again sub equals this, and then printed it out. Let's have a look and see if that I'm still getting a name error. Name error is not defined. Let's just check that line 6 and then line 22. So line 6 I'm returning here I've returned the return name needs to be the name of this variable, but here I can call this whatever I want, whatever variable name I want, that's going to be the value that's returned out of these. Okay, good, now it works. Okay, so now I've got some functions with addition and subtraction where I am having these the values from the variables in the parameters at the top, and the arguments from these variables plugged in, and then I'm returning the values and then printing it out onto the screen. And I could do the same with multiplication and division as well, with the variables being put in as arguments, and then handling them as parameters here, and then returning the values out to me.